Welcome, everyone. It's Gabriel, and I'm here with our latest episode of our LinkedIn audio series on AI and automation. Today, I am joined by my good friend Mark Goodair, who leads our COE at Automation Anywhere. Mark, we've got a great guest and a great topic today, creating a culture of innovation around AI and automation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gabe. You were right. We got a great topic and a wonderful guest as well. So excited to be here and excited for the conversation.
Well, let's not keep him waiting. Let me introduce our special guest. Mr. Sunil Renka is the founder of Predictly, a global technology consultant who specializes in AI and automation. Sunil, welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's always pleasure, Gabe, to partner with you and Mark and the team. Looking forward.
Awesome,
Yeah, thanks so much
Sunil.
for joining.
It's great to have you, Sunil. Yeah, thanks for being part of this. You wrote a really interesting article. I actually posted it along with this event announcement a short while ago. This article on Forbes, and I think the title was "How Automation Cultivates a Culture of Innovation." Super interesting topic. I think we all understand how automation's changing the future of work. But can you tell us a little bit more about the culture piece?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, what I did was in last few months, I took an initiative and I call it a mindshare initiative, where I reached out to set of CIOs and CFO because I could see a gap in the approach. And as part of that, when we were having this conversation about how productivity and efficiency is getting more important, and as you will hear more along, if you hear the SEC filings of or the latest results from Facebook or any of these big companies, they are more focused on efficiency part of it. And when we started having conversation with these leaders, it was very prudent that it's not just about bringing in an automation and just increasing the productivity of individuals, but it was not just about you bring in, you do one automation and leave it, and it's going to be far more productive. But what we realized it's not just about bringing in a technology in house, but it was about bringing in a culture. Because every time you brought in an automation, you brought in as part of your core DNA culture, people started thinking about along those lines that yes, this is a possibility, or this could be done. And that's how over the time period, along with the technology, culture is getting far more important because that gives us confidence that yes, this is a guiding principle, and at the same time, using this technology, productivity can be increased, and that's the reason wrote that article after discussing with quite a few industry leaders.
Yeah, it's a great read, and I recommend all of our listeners today check it out. Sunil is prolific on Forbes and in other places, and I always enjoy the stuff you're publishing, Sunil. I think it's interesting too, this idea of the culture in the concept of innovation. This idea you kind of mentioned, this idea of the art of the possible is something we talk about, right? And now with generative AI and the power of AI married with and in conjunction with automation, it seems like so many more things are possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, we are at an influx of the situation where I believe we are in a rare situation, or the rare what do you call the human history post internet, that we are standing at a juncture where the possibilities are immense, and it all depends upon how do we grab it. I was not around when internet was getting popular because I may be much younger compared to what I am today. But looking at the generative AI and the possibilities what we have, I've been through quite a few of cycles. I was part of ERP, BI, big data, and then I went to the venture world for the investment. But this is the first time where a product got released, and within no time everyone started talking about it and everyone wanted to build something on top of it. And the biggest testimony was when the larger companies started releasing things on top of this particular technology. If you followed last week's conference, Tableau conference, they released something called Tableau GPT. Everyone is trying to release some shape and form of GPT technology. This is where the opportunities, and this is where what we are talking about is generative AI is here to stay. It's not a fad. The possibilities are so much immense that if we can bring in generative AI as part of the technology stack, then the automation becomes a key aspect of it. But at the same time, it's going to fundamentally solve many problems which enterprises were not able to solve for years, for many years. I mean, it could be as simple as right now what we have seen is just a preview of what essentially the writing is all about. We had an opportunity to invest into a company called Jasper.ai. It became a
Hmm.
unicorn, and Jasper was preamble to what ChatGPT is today. So we saw the technology evolving, we saw the technology getting built over the years, but in my opinion, the way the generative AI would be taking the larger part of the industry to the storm would be when you start doing a prescriptive instructions and generative AI is building it. So for example, today you could, today you say that, okay, I've got an email from someone, I need to reply it, and generative AI helps you write that, format that emails. Now that's the first step towards, not needed a paralegal. But imagine a situation where you are sitting and you feel like playing a game from your childhood with your friends with a specific background, and you can give that instruction, and an AI generates a visual game for you in which you can spend time. Now that if that kind of situation arises, then the whole entertainment industry is taken for a ride, because now you don't need to go and spend millions of dollars in building what do you call it visual effects, but you can create your own visual effects. I mean, that's where the whole piece of generative AI is going to go. The enterprises will already started seeing the I mean, especially our customers are asking for putting generative AI as part of the automation. um, you know what we used to call it like human in the loop, the portion of that human in the loop can be decided by generative AI, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of exciting use cases what we are hearing and learning about it in the
Hmm.
industry, and so it's an exciting time.
I think it's interesting you brought up. I just went and watched Guardians of the Galaxy with my family, and I was looking at this film, thinking, man, the technology. And I actually listened to some podcasts around filmmaking and whatnot. And they're talking about all the new um, innovations in the creative side and in the CGI and all these things. And you look at something like Dolly or some of these other tools that are out there. It's amazing what's happening. But I want to get back to the culture piece. Mark, you lead the COE at Automation Anywhere, and fundamentally, you're at the epicenter of this cultural aspect where there's an automation first mindset, so our teammates can work at the top of their expertise.
Yeah.
Instead of being mired in the milieu, in the mundane. What is your, from a culture perspective, what is your observation, here at an automation company, and
Sure.
how do you cultivate that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think what I'm getting even out of this conversation and Sunil's comments is a couple things come to mind. One is that there's a lot of change, and the speed of change is the other piece. I think those are kind of almost, I know they're related, but kind of two different things. There's a lot of things changing, and just the velocity, the sheer velocity. So I think the word that comes to mind when I think about this in terms of our COE strategy, I think one word would be intentionality. So in our COE, we're not just assuming that all these shifts that Sunil's talking about will just happen magically. We'll just snap our fingers and everyone will adjust to this new world and the new technology and how to exploit it. If we step back, it's a lot of change, and it's good that the technology and capabilities are advancing. But as Sunil said, in order to unlock that value, we also have to change along with it. So in the COE, I think we're putting in even extra effort to ensuring that obviously that we stay ahead of the curve, try and keep our head out the window in terms of what's coming, what's arrived and what's coming, which is for sure a challenge. And the other thing is making sure that our employees, especially those that are closest to the business processes, they also know what's possible. So for example, questions like what can generative AI do, or how can our automation co-pilot that we have in our product, how can it transform the automation experience for our employees? We don't assume the employees will have those answers, We actively engage them to discuss those topics and demo capabilities. Look what's happening over here, all with the interest of helping inspire a new way of thinking and working.
I think it's interesting because, to your point, when we talk about COE and say citizen development and some of these other things, I just had a great conversation with Jenica from Humana, and hopefully we can publish that story. But she was talking about, and I want to get to this subject. So we're talking about generative AI right now, but there's going to be another technology at some point. But Sunil, the point I think that we're getting to and what we're discussing today is that if you have a strong culture in a culture of innovation, perhaps spurred by automation, you're going to be in a much better place to leverage any emerging technology. And I think, Mark, that's kind of what you're speaking to as well, right?
Mhm.
The approach, the understanding, the safeguard, the guardrails. So you'll talk to me a little bit more about this.
Sure. So, I mean, by the basic definition, right, a culture can be defined as a shared belief, values, behavior, and the artifacts. Um, if you ever got a chance, read about Netflix has published a detailed Bible about their culture, and the reason they did was because they wanted to have people read it before they come and appear for the interview for their company, so that they exactly know how it's going to behave. Now, if you can bring in the culture of innovation, or if you can bring in the culture of automation, as you rightly said, the no new technology can take you back because you already have that as part of your mindset. Because culture shapes the identity of individuals, business units, and it provides you a framework for understanding the world, that there is a certain way they're interacting with others, and that's kind of becomes the kind of a baseline. If you look at if the way we when we go into a project, when we start having a conversation, the very first thing when we start having conversation with our customer is about, don't think of automation as reduction of the headcounts, or it's about, but it's all about not just saving the money, but it's about what you're bringing onto the table. It's about the belief and the values. There are some certain principle ideas, there are certain moral codes that, okay, I can do certain things in a certain way. It will not only help me, but it will help the company at an entirety of the level. Like, if you bring in the custom and tradition of automation within the company setup, by default people will start thinking about it, that okay, the work can be done in specific way. I give you an example of, we were working with this one of the largest loan processor company in United States. The very first thing they had it, okay, it's a seasonal business because the interest rates were low, we were writing a lot of loans. The very first thing was, okay, let's start hiring people. That was their first thing, that how do we scale. But once they brought in automation, they could, seeing is believing, because they could see that, oh, it's not just about bringing in people, but it's about providing more automation so that we can be more efficient, and at the same time the changes can be made much easier. So for example, post COVID, there was certain regulation in terms of the disperse of the loan amount, versus now all they had to do was just go and make certain changes into that technological piece, which were the bots in this case. But the point was, once they started thinking that automation brings in a better efficiency of the entirety of the process, that was the cultural belief, that was the value system they ingrain. And now anything and everything what they talk about, they just want to put automation first and then start thinking about the process. So that's the power of a culture, because that brings a shared belief.
And through the technology, through that automation, again, building as the one of the spurring innovation or spurring the culture. To your point about, say, that the lender scenario, which we've seen with many of our global clients, you have that built-in resiliency and flexibility so that you aren't yo-yoing workforce and individuals, hiring, laying off, and creating this, dynamic that in many ways has negative impacts, and not just for the business but for the people, right? So you're actually impacting the people and improving their situation as well.
A- Absolutely. And actually, I mean, the way we say is that culture influences the way people organize themselves. So if you bring in the culture of innovation and automation, people tend to organize themselves automatically around that. And that's eventually what happens is if you are doing a repetitive and mundane task, the chances of you losing that employee is much higher. But if you bring in a little bit of innovation into his or her work, the tendency to have that employee stay is much longer compared to
Agreed.
the repetitive mundane task. And that's the
Agreed.
reason it does influence the way people think and the way people organize themselves.
I completely agree. And I mean, Sunil, I think again, one thing that you talked about in the article was, when we talk about this culture of innovation, exactly as you're talking about it, it's talking about an environment where it's okay to take some calculated risks. People are not just immediately punished for failing. We use those kind of things as an opportunity to learn and move forward. That's really kind of the state that you need to be in if you're going to embrace these new technologies, right? If we're afraid of failure, we're afraid to try things, we're not taking any risks. It's very difficult to make that kind of advancement.
Absolutely. And I think I have a daughter, she's 17-year-old, aspiring to take up a science as her major at some once she starts going to college. More I interact with these Gen Z, and they are going to be the future of workforce. So in about 7 to 8 years, this particular set of people are going to be part of your workforce. These people are totally different than the traditionally what people have worked. I mean, if you look at the generation of my mom and dad, they ended up working at a single company for 34 years, and the loyalty was a big thing. And then when we started coming into the workforce, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years wasn't a norm. And now, if you start looking at, right, people tend to change job every 2 years. And if
Mm-hmm.
you start thinking about long term viability of your organization, then when Gen Z becomes part of your working culture, they are not going to continue to work the way we've been working for past so many years. And
Right.
that's when bringing this kind of culture of innovation and automation is going to be key, because for you to attract them, you cannot just tell them what this is how it's been done. And that's the most what do you call the feared word, in my opinion. And that's the reason bringing these customs and traditions, we have to start thinking in a totally sociological change aspect of it. And that's the reason budding this culture today is very important for all the leaders, and automation AI would lead that path.
Awesome.
I think it's a competitive advantage, right? Like, you think back, like my kids aren't going to go work for a company that doesn't have digital workers helping them, right? Is basically the
Exactly.
point. Just like, I wouldn't go work at a company that is still using a fax machine and doesn't have the internet. I mean, that's basically what we're talking about, right?
Agreed.
Hey guys, we have an audience member who wants to ask a question. Mark, I'm going to get to you in 1 second. Before we get to Mark, I want to let you guys know in the comments there is a survey, and Predictly and Sunil have generously sponsored a Yeti mug giveaway. Complete the survey and enter to win. This is for North American attendees only, but do go fill out the survey and let us know what you're thinking. All right, Mark, what can you tell us? And welcome to the show, Mark.
The famous word, Mark, you are on mute.
Mark with a C, not to be confused with myself.
Yes,
Well,
even he's on.
all right, Mark.
Yeah, even he's
We
on
tried.
mute.
Yeah.
Yep, he dropped. All right. Well, listeners, as you know, this is an interactive format. So if you do want to ask a question live on the show, simply raise your hand. You can click your icon, and there's some different request buttons there that you can use to get on the show. So, all right, moving on. So, when we talk about automation, I think at this point, generally speaking, it seems it's table stakes, right? Everyone knows there's an automation imperative. to build resiliency, to save time, money, to help. We have so many use cases. We've partnered with you, Sunil, with big customers, right, to help improve the customer and employee experience. And we just talked about the employee experience being a competitive advantage. But Sunil, I want to go back to what you were talking about, and we had talked about this earlier. This idea of increasing productivity and efficiency. There's so much data out there. The McKinsey report about the 1.5x to meet productivity goals over the GDP productivity goals over the next 10 years. But talk to me a little bit about what you're hearing. What are some of the common things you're hearing from those C-suite executives you've been conducting these interviews with?
So, this is one of the most exciting times. If you got a chance to listen to what Facebook released as part of their quarterly results, I think they use efficiency and productivity more than 27 times. I'm not sure if I'm quoting the number correctly, but it was more than a double digit, basically. And then if you start seeing the similar quarterly result from the much bigger companies, right? They all just talk about efficiency and productivity. I think the reason people are talking about efficiency and productivity is because of the tightness of the labor market. People are not talking about letting people go, but what they're talking about, they want to retain the best talent, and they want to retain the best talent in a way so that they can be more productive. Now that's where people are leaning towards. That's where the C-suite wants to invest into, so that the productivity and efficiency of the individuals can be increased, so that the growth can be sustained with the similar or more number of people if needed need to be. And if you look at it, people started getting into this productive and efficiency mindset about 10 to 15 years back, when the cloud came into the existence. If you look at the classic example of Netflix, they released a big movie, and if they had to host their own infrastructure, they would have never been successful what they are today. But because of AWS, they can put up more EC2 servers, and they can serve the capacity. I think that's where in the physical model they want to get to. Again, going back to this loan example, there are seasonal situations where before the start of the school year, people tend to move for the bigger and better school district, or they tend to move out because they have already graduated from the school, and so on and so forth. Now, if they want to improvise the efficiency and productivity of loan disbursement, because loan disbursement is a fractional point margin case, because what happens is they don't make like a couple of points on every loan. They just make like fraction of the cone a margin from a dollar perspective, which means that if they can bring in a technology which can improvise the efficiency and productivity, I think that's what they're looking for. Now, when we are having a conversation with the third largest vision insurance company in the United States, their challenge is they don't even know how exactly their processes are running, because they were bought out by PE, then they got acquired by someone else. Now they want to just bring in the efficiency, and they want to make their processes more efficient, but they just don't even know how their processes are running. I think that's where the conversations are happening, that at least get to know where we are at, and then we can improvise it. And that's a common theme across the different pieces. Now, having generative AI has gave them a confidence that it can be done at a consumer level. Sorry, you're asking a question, Gabe.
No, I think you this idea of the overview and the overarching view of looking at a process. So you can automate a task, right? Which is where many companies go, and there's an end-to-end solution, and now that's expanding. But I think there's a broader conversation, and maybe Mark, you can talk about this a little bit too, from the COE perspective, of looking at the whole process, the related processes, getting through silos and connecting different functions to make that whole process, the whole workflow rather, and really creating a new system of work. Talk to me a little bit about how this cultural shift can optimize across the enterprise.
Yeah, I think that's really, really that's a really, really important insight. I think one way when we're talking about the potential business value of automating something, I'll call it, automating a process or automating some tasks. That's one of the suggestions we frequently make is if somebody comes to us with an idea and say, I think we could automate this. One of the questions we always try and ask is exactly what you just mentioned. Really, really interesting. What happens before that? Where does that input come from? And then similarly, at the end of it, where is it going? So a great example of that is sometimes someone will come with an automation idea and it takes some input and executes some things in some systems and ends up with an email to Gabriel asking him to do something. So our next question is, what are you asking Gabriel to do, right? How can we capture that portion of the process as well, so that instead of just another email landing in Gabriel's inbox telling him to do something, we can actually capture and automate that part of the process as well. And ultimately what that ends up doing is capturing a greater amount of the value, even if it's a cross-functional process. It's fully auditable end to end. And that's kind of a sweet spot for Automation Copilot and ARI that we have in our product.
Yeah, I get plenty of emails, Mark. So
but
to your point, I think the Automation Copilot, we've talked about this a little bit before, but getting the sort of responses there and next best action, and
Yes.
being able to work cross-platform from my perspective in my use cases.
Yes.
Is just a game changer for me. And Sunil, you had mentioned earlier too, this idea of, with generative AI sort of replacing human in the loop. I want to touch on that a little bit too, because one of the things we hear and know is that generative AI is great, and it certainly will get better, I'm sure. But it's giving you its best response, but it might not be the right response. So this culture of innovation idea, building in those safeguards to say, okay, you've got a response from the model, but is it the right run? Does it work for you? Do you press go or do you stop and correct?
Yeah, I mean, human in the loop. So human are not going away at any point in time. Today, the way the AI, if you look at today's offering of AI, is based on what has happened in the past, which means GPT has been trained on more than 25,000 GPUs with like more than 1 million different what they call it the parameters, and that's the reason you are getting a pointed answer compared to what Google is very good at, which is like zoning you in the answer. And this is possibility because we have a better processing power availability today, but the data still is the same. It's just that the information is getting represented in a much better form. In fact, if you go to ChatGPT, right, they stop telling you any answer beyond September 2021. So my point here is AI is great at what has already happened. And that's the reason when we start having a conversation and bringing automation or AI, we always talk about human in the loop part of it, which means what we say is repetitive mundane tasks, which are a logical machine can do it. But if you have to make a tactical or a strategic decision, you need that human in the human in the loop. Well, what will happen is with the generative AI, the part of that human in the loop would continue to delve into more strategic answers, but at the same time, human in the loop will be always needed. I think that's where we need to start thinking. And very interestingly, what's happening is as we bring in the culture of automation into different companies, right? Now, customers are asking about, can we help them write policies, that what is the right thing to do in terms of the automation, what is right thing to do, how to do it. Are we making a lot of silos? Are we over analyzing the automation, or are we building way too many automations which is going to go out of hand? I think that's where people are asking help on policies. And in my opinion, right, the policies are nothing but some set of culture. They need to just build that out. So it's a very interesting time where people are asking for different things outside of just building bots.
And I think that policy, those guardrails, those safeguards, the approach, to your point, that is the subset or part and parcel to this idea of that culture of innovation, right?
That is correct. That is correct. And I think I'll go back to one of the point what you had asked Mark earlier is about, I mean, today we are at a point where when we walk into a project, right, rather than just jumping onto the bandwagon of automation, we say, okay, let's start analyzing where we are at. Let's just assess where we are at. Do we really need automation, or it's just making certain changes as part of the automation? So we had this one customer. They are big into outdoor camping. The CIO comes back and says, hey, we have such a big trouble with this particular inventory reconciliation across three different platforms. Can you help us out? We just jumped onto the bandwagon. We were given a requirement. We started building it. And as we were just validating, we found out at part of the process, they are generating an Excel file. And that Excel file is getting generated on a laptop. And that laptop is run by a lady. She has to go back home and generate that Excel file for hours. And then she has to continue to do it if it fails, and then upload it in the morning. And then the process will pick it up. We said, if you just push this whole process into an AWS server, you will improvise your efficiency by 40%. And the CIO was like, okay, perfectly fine. This is what I needed. I may not need automation. So the point here is knowing where you are at, what you are doing today, and a process discovery is an important part of your automation journey. And that's the reason some of the products like FIQ or any of the leading process discovery products are very, very key, because that gives you the current mindset of your organization, and that will help you make that changes, because it's a what they call it, like it's a 800-pound gorilla, or it's an elephant in the room. Making the elephant move is a tough one. So wherever we are going today, we are just pushing for automated process discovery. And I wrote an article on that aspect as well, that knowing where you stand today is the first step towards defining your culture.
It's a great point. And I want to dive into this process discovery bit more. But before I do, we have another guest who's raised their hand. Let's invite Matthew to the show and see what Matthew wants to know.
Awesome.
Matthew, are you there?
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, Matthew. Thanks for joining.
Hi. No worries. Hi, everyone. I just want to, before we move away from the culture point and the safeguards bit that Sunil talked about. So I work as a data privacy lawyer. And one thing that we're seeing is like sort of this varied approach to AI in different kind of jurisdictions. And you've got the people who are really pro AI, like the UK, and people who are super jittery, like say Italy, for example. And one thing we're advising our clients at the moment is we know that the laws kind of, because there's an impact to data subjects, for instance, and especially kind of a right to get redress where automated processing adversely affects their rights and ability to kind of consent to automated processing in the first place. But what I feel is, this is better suited not at a policy level, but at a really technical level. So I just wondered if you guys could spare maybe 5 or so minutes and kind of say, look, what are the technical controls that you can put in place in a end-to-end sort of process that would kind of protect? Are we talking simple things like anonymization and encryption? Is that as far as it can go? Or what are some of the strategies you're employing so that those safeguards are kind of baked into your solutions and processes?
Yeah, a great question. Mark, you want to take it first, or you want me to take it first?
Sure, Sunil. I have a couple thoughts, and then I'd love to hear what you have to say. Matthew, thanks for the great question. I think there's a couple pieces. I think within Automation Anywhere, one thing we're thinking about is, and it very much relates to this concept of innovation. Some of the best innovation happens not when there's no guardrails. Some of the best innovation and problem solving happens when there actually are some constraints. So that'd be the first thing I'd mention, that the idea of having these safeguards and constraints isn't at odds with innovation. I think they're very much complementary. I would say that one thing we're thinking about is, from a technology standpoint, is are there certain software solutions and things like that can be almost like a firewall between employees and some of these repositories or some of these generative AI solutions, for example. So what that means essentially is, rather than necessarily going directly to one of those sources and maybe getting into issues with, compromising data security and privacy and things like that, sometimes the right solution can be an intermediate piece of software that kind of acts as a firewall to make sure that really the right kind of questions are going to the right destination. And so a real practical example of that is maybe we want our workforce to be able to get our enterprise questions answered in the right way. But if they're outside the scope of the enterprise, then maybe we need ChatGPT's help. So sometimes those software solutions that we've been kind of experimenting with that can help us in terms of making sure the answers are coming from the right source, depending on what the type of question is. And obviously that can also help us protect data from going to the wrong places. Sunil, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, a great question. And again, the guardrails, the AI policies or the automation policies or the culture, what we're talking about. Some of the things where we were involved, where either the data was sensitive or the decisions were sensitive, when we build the entirety of the process flow, we exactly knew where the sensitive information needs to lie or where the sensitive information is getting transmitted. And what we have done is on a forced approach of human in the loop. Now, what you talked about, the data encryption, data privacy, these all are table stake in my opinion. So, for example, if the data at rest is encrypted, it's part of your infrastructure or the product what you're using. But when the data in transit needs to be done, people do transmit it over SSL and more of the encryption. But putting the human in the loop is a more important part of it, because so that there is an audit trail, not from a technology perspective, but from a human chain perspective as well. I'll give you an example where we had a situation where we had to transfer the funds. Basically, depending upon certain business rules, we had to transfer the fund using either ACH and wire. We could have done the entire of the process automated. But what we made a point is, we will create the list, we will validate the list, we will send out a summarization to few people. And unless until we don't get an approval from those people, we will not be making the next move. This is just an analogy. In your case, you could build something around so and so forth. So having a human in the loop is an important aspect of it. The data protection and everything what you're talking about is, in my opinion, is a table stake depending upon what you're using.
Mm-hmm.
I think cue music for shameless plug time. Our upcoming AI event on June 1st, I think you're going to see a lot of innovations and announcements around the technology that we provide that will address some of the things you brought up. I think there's some very exciting stuff coming up, and I think fundamentally, this idea, just Sunil, that you and Mark both mentioned, that human in the loop, but with the automation and what we're seeing, like with Automation Copilot or otherwise, you're able to sort of build in the guardrails through the automation, right? So things don't go via email or somewhere else that aren't meant to be because the human made a bad decision, or maybe not a bad decision, but just didn't sort of think it all the way through. So you've got some built-in controls via the automation and the way it's built, right? And then leveraging AI. It's obviously at the top of everyone's list. And I think too, some of the announcements from our partners around the private model farms and other things too, where your data and your language model is within the context and within the walls of your enterprise or of your environment. I think that's an interesting development as well.
Yeah, that's a real important one, Gabe. I think that's really interesting with offerings coming from folks like Google. That whole piece about being able to use generative AI, with an enterprise perspective instead of kind of global public data, I think is super crucial. And I think it's not kind of either or. I think both have their place. But yeah, I agree. That's really, really important.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
like I said, look in the comment section for the link to the AI event. It's going to be huge. We've got a huge number of RSVPs already, and I invite you all to join. It's going to be groundbreaking as this wave continues. So so please join us for that. Also, next week on our next LinkedIn audio event or show, we will have Peter White, who leads our AI and automation practice here at Automation Anywhere, diving in a little bit deeper. So invite you to join that as well, as you can ask and get real technical and geek out with Peter next week. So guys, I have another question. I want to talk a little bit about, so we've talked about sort of the things to consider and different processes even in use cases, but how do you know if you're successful? What as you're implementing and moving forward and building this culture of innovation via automation, what are you measuring? What do you guys recommend from a start, walk, crawl, run, if you will?
Oh yeah, great question, Gabe. And I knew it's coming. I think the hardest part is the quantifying the innovation. I think that's what we have learned. I was part of a venture, and where we used to evaluate the companies, and then we used to sometimes think, okay, you know what, we can just bet on the founders and let's see what happens. I think that similar mindset comes into the play when you are bringing an innovation into within the organization. And when you are in a setup of an organization, you have to have some kind of a key metrics, which needs to be used to measure the innovation, or whether automation is driving innovation, or is it building a few things. So I think the one of the ways, at least what we have been calculating, is the number of hours bots been running, how much of productive time they have done, if there is a direct correlation in terms of the dollar amount, like how much of, let's say, either orders have been processed, invoices have been processed, how much it has impacted directly and indirectly in terms of the revenue. I think that's one key aspect of it. But within that organization, post implementing this particular bot, how many more ideas have come out for automation is another key metric what we look at, because that drives the innovation, that drives the culture, that yes, people are thinking about innovation, and now they're not worried about they are losing their job, because automation has proven that it is helping their job. Basically, they are getting an assistant for free, which is helping to do their job so that they can go back home and enjoy time with their family. So some of those things we measure that, how many more new ideas have come in, how much more people are enthusiastic about it, how much of the current technology bots are being utilized, how many tickets are being filed, what are the different revenue impacts people are having. So depending upon the organization, there are different key metrics, but one of the key metrics what we look at is how many more ideas are generated post this.
I love that. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, completely agree. I think one thing I even pulled out of Sunil's article was the importance of measuring the innovation aspect. And I think Sunil was just sharing on this, but it's something that we put in, again, plug for our Pathfinder program. One of the things we discussed there is one of the big items in any automation program or innovation program really is this whole aspect of measuring the ideas. So how many ideas are coming in, what kind of ideas are coming in, which ones are good and executable and have value, and also the source of ideas. So for example, that's one thing within our automation program that we measure is where are the ideas coming from, and what does it tell you about the program? What does it tell you about your workforce when you understand where the good ideas are coming from? Is there something in the water they're drinking in a certain department that all these good ideas are coming from there, right? And I think one thing that Sunil really helped nail is in this whole relationship between automation and innovation is what's the value that we can get out of having our workforce, our employees, just have some thinking time. If automation can help free people to think clearly and brainstorm, what's the potential value that could be created? Maybe it's tough to quantify until you actually do it and start to see the fruit of it. But we've had some wonderful automations come out of our own automation program that, one in my mind in particular, helps assess, do kind of a 9-box rating for our workforce at scale. It's extremely powerful. And if you talk to the program lead for our HR or people experience area, they'll say, that there's no way that idea would have come the way it did without having some time freed up from automation. So I think all this gets back to performance management and how we measure it, but really, really important to measure this aspect of innovation as well as the more traditional metrics, like direct savings and productivity improvements from automation.
I mean,
It's good. Sorry, Sunil, go ahead.
No, I mean, so Mark, I mean, perfect. I mean, you just nailed it. I mean, what they say is the reason the Google has a culture, because at some point in time when they were early stage, they used to give employees like 20% of their time off. You just go do something. And what they say, the most of the best products came out of that 20% time off, which was paid by the company. So, I don't want to call it like, but I hate it when people say, okay, they invite us, they say, okay, you conduct a session and the ideas will start flowing in post that session. And that's hard for me to quantify that because we know we are going to fail because people have been pushed to bring those ideas in. So, and that's the reason this whole piece of culture, innovation is very important, where the ideas needs to free flow. And in my opinion, for the companies like Google who can afford it to give 20% time off, but we work with a lot of SMB companies and we know their constraints because either they're tightly strapped on the cash flow or they just have enough people. And what I keep telling CIOs is bringing automation is the cheapest way for them to bring in a culture of innovation, because seeing is believing it. And that's where I firmly believe that bringing in automation brings in the culture of innovation, and that's going to transpire many more innovations within that company or within that industry. And I think I'm a true believer of that.
Agreed.
I think one of my favorite stories is kind of along these lines is a few years ago, pre-pandemic, was at Imagine, and Walgreens Boots Alliance, the finance department showed a use case, and ultimately they named their automation the employee of the month because for the first time in years, they were during quarter close, they were actually able to go home on the weekend and not like literally sleep in the office closing the quarter. Their automation, I forget the name of the automation, they had named it, allowed them to have that quality of life. I always say, like, it's good that I can, increase my efficiency at work or whatever, but what's great? Being able to go, coach my daughter's soccer team on the weekends because I don't have to work all weekend because I'm swamped.
Yes.
Right. And that's pre-pandemic. That's in sort of normal times, and that's sort of where we're at. And now with, again, the productivity challenge, the workforce shortage crisis, all of these things, it's imperative, right? I think, I want to take a moment, guys. There's a couple provocative comments in the thread, and we thank you guys for putting those there. I think we've kind of spoken to it a little bit, but one of the comments was, I don't want to talk about it. I'm not interested in technology that's replacing humans. And I think that's not what we're talking about. To me, this technology, automation, and now with the power of AI, is empowering us to do more. Secondly, there was just a recent comment about the reskilling need, and that is absolutely huge and fundamental. And I think what we're talking about here too is with the technology like automation, and specifically selfish plug, but with the low code, no code functionality, with the ability to empower business users like myself. I'm not a technologist, but I can build automations for me and my team. We are talking about providing the ability to leverage the technology to build bots so you can create a career. And we have stories around that I think are super exciting. So I think it's not about, we've talked about human in the loop, we've talked about empowerment, but this isn't a conversation necessarily about replacing people to do these tasks. This is about freeing people to do the other things that humans should be doing, right?
Totally.
Absolutely. I mean, and Gabe, one thing what you touched was the employee of the week, right? So I just
Mhm.
shared a story where this lady had to run she had to run the Excel generation on her laptop, and when we identified that and we automated that to put it on AWS, the first thing she came in our celebration event and said, "Thank you guys. Now I can have a peaceful dinner with my family."
Mm.
No, I
and
love
it
it.
and it was so subtle thing, and it just sparked an idea saying that it's not about replacing human, it's about making their life better. And technologies have done again and again, years and years. Um, uh, if technology did not exist, we would have not sailed through pandemic. Half of the world would have been dead by now. So the point here is technology is here to stay. Human needs to make the best out of it. Every technological change has replaced a skill set, not human, but that gives an opportunity for that particular individual or the human to scale them up to get better utilized somewhere else. Because from now onwards, there will be always a labor shortage. There's no short of work, but there's a short of skill.
Hmm.
I think we have to start thinking in
Hmm.
that direction.
Yeah, it really is one of those. All that stuff is cliche in a sense, but it's the lens that you use to look at it. But I think that's very well said, Sunil. It really, this is about we believe in the potential of people. We believe that people are capable of solving huge problems and thinking through really interesting topics. But they've got to have the time and the capacity to do it. Some of the best ideas for an automation program can come by just asking those questions of our workforce. We talked to Gabe, and I'm in a water cooler conversation with Gabe, and he says, I'm working 12-hour days. What automation would make that 10 hours? Right? It's a good way to look at it, right?
Yeah.
This technology, digital assistants, all this fun stuff, it needs to be serving us, not the other way around. It's here to
Yeah,
help our.
and this is the exact thing what the culture of innovation brings in. Now, Gabe, you would have not thought about this 5 years back, that, oh, I can still reduce my hours and be productive. But now you started thinking about it. Now the thought will get provoked, and at some point in time, you will start building those automation for yourself as the technology matures more. So the point here is that's the importance of culture of innovation. That's the importance of culture of automation, and that's when the technologies like automation and AI is going to make every individual human life better.
Well, Sunil, let me correct you. I'm always thinking about reducing the amount of hours I work because I'm extremely lazy, but I'm kidding. No, it is. It's exciting. I've said this before. It's why I'm here, to be able to help tell the story, share the stories of folks like yourself, Mark, the team, the company, our customers, our partners, um, because it is, you know, it's fundamental to defining the future. Everyone says hashtag future of work. We're defining the future of work with this technology. We're empowering humans. I've gone and heard the stories of folks whose lives have been transformed by learning to develop bots,
Mhm.
and to become automation experts and certified in our programs, et cetera. It's so powerful, and more important than ever right now. But guys, we're at the top of the hour already. I could go on for another 3 hours probably. We can do like a Joe Rogan type of podcast here and go for 4 hours or so. But I will respect your time, Sunil and Mark. I know you've also got day jobs, so I just want to say thank you to our audience and to you, Sunil, for joining us, and Mark, as always, thank you so much for
Thank you.
an intriguing conversation. I love this topic around culture. I love the idea that the technology can be a catalyst to build this culture, and really change the world. I'm so excited about this, and I invite our audience to check out the links in the feed. There's a ton of content, on our YouTube page, in our feeds, on our webpage. Sunil, as I said, is a prolific writer with amazing insights. So do consume his content, and I invite you all to connect with them as well. But Sunil, thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you, Gabe and Mark. I truly appreciate all the partnership Automation Anywhere has provided us. It has fundamentally changed my life. So I am truly grateful that the decision I made few years back to become an exclusive partner of Automation Anywhere. So thank you for all the support. Thank you, team. Thanks, Mark. As usual, it's always a pleasure to have an insightful conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Sunil, and thanks, Gabe, for hosting.
Yeah, and thanks so much. We appreciate the partnership, and we look at this as a partnership, right? We're in this together, whether it's with sort of our technical partners, but also our customers. We look at it as a partnership. It's not partnership. It's not a vendor customer relationship. We're in this together. So it's exciting stuff. More to come. Do tune in next week. We have another event, as I mentioned, with Peter White, who leads our AI team here, and we're going to dive in and get geeky. So we'll see you then. And thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.